most good plans, as the deadliest of enemies, they were Mother Hitton's Littulkittons by Cordwainer Smith. Poor communications deter theft, good communications promote theft, perfect communications stop theft. Dead wrong. By the moon's fun, the woman watched. 21 facets had been polished at the moon's equator. Her function was to harm it. She was Mother Hitton, the weapons mistress of old North Australia. She was a ruddy-faced, cheerful blonde of indeterminate age. Her eyes were blue, her bosom heavy, her arms strong. She looked like a mother, but the only child she had ever had died many generations ago. Now she acted as mother to a planet, not to a person. The North Australians slept well because they knew she was watching. The weapons slept their long, sick sleep. This night she glanced for the 200th time at the warning bank. The bank was quiet, no danger lights shone. Yet she felt an enemy out somewhere in the universe, an enemy waiting to strike at her in her world, to snatch at the immeasurable wealth of the North Australians, and she snorted with impatience. Come along, little man, she thought. Come along, little man, and die. Don't keep me waiting. She smiled when she recognized the absurdity of her own thought. She waited for him, and he did not know it. The robber was relaxed enough. He was Benjamin Bozart and was highly trained in the arts of relaxation. No one at Sunvale, here on Chalet, could suspect that he was a senior warden of the Guild of Thieves, reared under the light of the starry violet star. No one could smell the odor of Viola Sidereea upon him. Viola Sidereea, the Lady Rue had said, was once the most beautiful of worlds, and it is now the most rotten. Its people were once models for mankind, and now they are thieves, liars, and killers. You can smell their souls in the open day. The Lady Rue had died a long time ago. She was much respected, but she was wrong. The robber did not smell to others at all. He knew it. He was no more wrong than a shark approaching a school of cod. Life's nature is to live, and he had been nurtured to live as he had to live, by seeking prey. How else could he live? Viola Sidereea had gone bankrupt a long time ago, when the photonic sails had disappeared from space and the plano-forming ships began to whisper their way between the stars. His ancestors had been left to die on an off-trail planet. They refused to die. Their ecology shifted and they became predators upon man, adapted by time and genetics to their deadly tasks. And the robber was champion of all his people, the best of their best. He was Benjamin Bozart. He had sworn to rob old North Australia or to die in the attempt, and he had no intention of dying. The beach at Sunvale was warm and lovely. Chalet was a free and casual transit planet. His weapons were luck in himself. He planned to play both well. The North Australians could kill. So could he. At this moment, in this place, he was a happy tourist at a lovely beach. Elsewhere, he could become a ferret among ponies, a hawk among doves. Benjamin Bozart, thief and warden. He did not know that someone was waiting for him. Someone who did not know his name was prepared to wake in death just for him. He was still serene. Mother Hitton was not serene. She sensed him dimly but could not yet spot him. One of her weapons snored. She turned it over. 1,000 stars away, Benjamin Bozart smiled as he walked toward the beach. To Benjamin felt like a tourist. His tanned face was tranquil. His proud, hooded eyes were calm. His handsome mouth, even without its charming smile, kept a suggestion of pleasantness at its corners. He looked attractive without seeming odd in the least. He looked much younger than he actually was. He walked with springy, happy steps along the beach of Sunvale. The waves rolled in, white-crested, like the breakers of Mother Earth. The Sunvale people were proud of the way their world resembled Manhome itself. Few of them had even seen Manhome. But they had all heard a bit of history, and most of them had a passing anxiety when they thought of the ancient government still wielding political power across the depth of space. They did not like the old instrumentality of Earth, but they respected and feared it. The waves might remind them of the pretty side of Earth. They did not want to remember the nuts of pretty side. This man was like the pretty side of old Earth. They could not sense the power within him. The Sunvale people smiled absently at him as he walked past them along the shoreline. The atmosphere was quiet and everything around him serene. He turned his face to the sun. He closed his eyes. He let the warm sunlight beam through his eyelids, illuminating him with its comfort and its reassuring touch. Benjamin dreamed of the greatest theft that any man had ever planned. He dreamed of stealing a huge load of the wealth from the richest world that mankind had ever built. He thought of what would happen when he would finally bring riches back to the planet of Viola, Siberia, where he had been reared. Benjamin turned his face away from the sun and languidly looked over the other people on the beach. There were no Australians in sight yet. They were easy enough to recognize. Big people with red complexions, superb athletes, and yet, in their own way, innocent, young, and very tough. He had trained for this theft for 200 years, his life prolonged for the purpose by the Guild of Thieves on Viola, Siberia. He himself embodied the dreams of his own planet, a poor planet once a crossroads of commerce, now sunk into being a minor outpost for spoliation and pilferage. He saw an Australian woman come out from the hotel and go down to the beach. He waited, and he looked, and he dreamed. He had a question to ask, and no adult Australian would answer it. Funny, thought he, that I call them Australians even now. That's the old Earth name for them, rich, brave, tough people. Fighting children standing on half the world. And now they are the tyrants of all mankind. They hold the wealth. They have the Santa Clara, and other people live or die depending upon the commerce they have with the Australians. But I won't, and my people won't. We're men who are wolves to man. Benjamin waited gracefully, tanned by the light of many suns. He looked 40 though he was 200. He dressed casually by the standards of a vacationer. He might have been an intercultural salesman, a senior gambler, an assistant starport manager. He might even have been a detective working along the commerce lanes. He wasn't. He was a thief. And he was so good a thief that people turned to him and put their property in his hands because he was reassuring, calm, gray-eyed, blonde-haired. Benjamin waited. The woman glanced at him, a quick glance full of open suspicion. What she said must have come to her. She went on past. She called back over the dune, "Come on, Johnny, we can swim out here." A little boy, who looked 8 or 10 years old, came over the dune top running toward his mother. Benjamin tensed like a cobra. His eyes became sharp, his eyelids narrowed. This was the prey, not too young, not too old. If the victim had been too young, he wouldn't know the answer. If the victim were too old, it was no use taking him on. Australians were famed in combat. Adults were mentally and physically too strong to warrant attack. Benjamin knew that every thief who had approached the planet of the Australians, who had tried to raid the dream world of old North Australia, had gotten out of contact with his people and had died. There was no word of any of them. And yet he knew that hundreds of thousands of Australians must know the secret. They now and then made jokes about it. He had heard these jokes when he was a young man, and now he was more than an old man without once coming near the answer. Life was expensive. He was well into his third lifetime, and the lifetimes had been purchased honestly by his people. Good thieves, all of them paying out hard-stolen money to obtain the medicine to let their greatest thief remain living. Benjamin didn't like violence. But when violence prepared the way to the greatest theft of all time, he was willing to use it. The woman looked at him again. The mask of evil which had flashed across his face faded into benignity. He calmed. She caught him in that moment of relaxation. She liked him. She smiled, and with that awkward hesitation, so characteristic of the Australians, she said, "Could you mind my boy a bit while I go in the water? I think we've seen each other here at the hotel." "I don't mind," said he. "I'd be glad to. Come here, son." Johnny walked across the sunlight dunes to his own death. He came within reach of his mother's enemy. But the mother had already turned. The trained hand of Benjamin Bozard reached out. He seized the child by the shoulder. He turned the boy toward him, forcing him down. Before child could cry out, Benjamin had the needle into him with the truth drug. All Johnny reacted to was pain, and then a hammer blew inside his own skull as the powerful drug took force. Benjamin looked out over the water. The mother was swimming. She seemed to be looking back at them. She was obviously unworried. To her, the child seemed to be looking at something the stranger was showing him in a relaxed, easy way. Now, Sonny, said Benjamin, tell me, what's the outside defense? The boy didn't answer. What is the outer defense, Sonny? What is the outer defense? Repeated Benjamin. The boy still didn't answer. Something close to horror ran over the skin of Benjamin Bozard as he realized that he had gambled his safety on this planet. Gambled the plans themselves for a chance to break the secret of the Australians. He had been stopped by simple, easy devices. The child had already been conditioned against attack. Any attempt to force knowledge out of the child brought on a conditioned reflex of total muteness. The boy was literally unable to talk. Sunlight gleaming on her wet hair, the mother turned around and called back, "Are you all right, Johnny?" Benjamin waved to her instead. "I'm showing him my pictures, ma'am. He likes him. Take your time." The mother hesitated and then turned back to the water and swam slowly away. Johnny, taken by the drug, sat lightly, like an invalid, on Benjamin's lap. Benjamin said, "Johnny, you're going to die now and you will hurt terribly if you don't tell me what I want to know." The boy struggled weakly against his grasp. Benjamin repeated, "I'm going to hurt you if you don't tell me what I want to know. What are the outer defenses? What are the outer defenses?" The child struggled and Benjamin realized that the boy was putting up a fight to comply with the orders, not a fight to get away. He let the child slip through his hands and the boy put out a finger and began writing on the wet sand. The letters stood out. A man's shadow limped behind them. Benjamin, alert, ready to spin, kill or run, slipped to the ground beside the child and said, "That's a jolly puzzle. That is a good one. Show me some more." He smiled up at the passing adult. The man was a stranger. The stranger gave him a very curious glance which became casual when he saw the pleasant face of Benjamin, so tenderly and so agreeably playing with the child. The fingers were still making the letters in the sand. There stood the riddle in letters, Mother Hitton's Littulkitons. The woman was coming back from the sea, the mother with questions. Benjamin stroked the sleeve of his coat and brought out his second needle, a shallow poison which it would take days or weeks of laboratory work to detect. He thrust it directly into the boy's brain, slipping the needle up behind the skin at the edge of the hairline. The hair shadowed the tiny prick. The incredibly hard needle slipped under the edge of the skull. The child was dead. Murder accomplished, Benjamin casually erased the secret from the sand. The woman came nearer. He called to her, his voice full of pleasant concern, "Ma'am, you'd better come here. I think your son has fainted from the heat." He gave the mother the body of her son. Her face changed to alarm. She looked frightened and alert. She didn't know how to meet this. For a dreadful moment she looked into his eyes. 200 years of training took effect. She saw nothing. The murderer did not shine with murder. The hawk was hidden beneath the dove. The heart was masked by the trained face. Benjamin relaxed in professional assurance. He had been prepared to kill her too, although he was not sure that he could kill an adult female Australian. Very helpfully said, "Would you stay here with him? I'll run to the hotel and get help. I'll hurry." He turned and ran. A beach attendant saw him and ran toward him. "The child's sick," he shouted. He came to the mother in time to see blunt, puzzled tragedy on her face and with it something more than tragedy, doubt. "He's not sick," said she. "He's dead." "It can't be." Benjamin looked attentive. He felt attentive. He forced the sympathy to pour out of his posture, out of all the little muscles of his face. "It can't be. I was talking to him just a minute ago. We were doing little puzzles in the sand." The mother spoke with a hollow, broken voice that sounded as though it would never find the right chords for human speech again, but would go on forever with the ill-attuned flats of unexpected grief. He's dead, she said. You saw him die and I guess I saw him die too. I can't tell what's happened. The child was full of Santa Clara. He had 1,000 years to live, but now he's dead. What's your name? Benjamin said, Ildon. Ildon the salesman, ma'am. I live here lots of times. 3. Mother Hitton's little kittens. Mother Hitton's little kittens. The silly phrase ran in his mind. Who was Mother Hitton? What was she the mother of? What were kittens? Were they a misspelling for kittens? Little cats? Or were they something else? Had he killed a fool to get a fool's answer? How many more days did he have to stay there with the doubtful, staggered woman? How many days did he have to watch and wait? He wanted to get back to Viola, Siberia, to take the secret bad as it was for his people to study. Who was Mother Hitton? He forced himself out of his room and went downstairs. The pleasant monotony of a big hotel was such that the other guests looked interestedly at him. He was the man who had watched while the child died on the beach. Some lobby living scandal mongers that stayed there had made up fantastic stories that he had killed the child. Others attacked the stories, saying they knew perfectly well who Ildon was. He was Ildon the salesman. It was ridiculous. People hadn't changed much, even though the ships with the goat captains sitting at their hearts whispered between the stars, even though people shuffled between worlds. When they had the money to pay their passage back and forth like leaves falling in soft, playful winds. Benjamin faced a tragic dilemma. He knew very well that any attempt to decode the answer would run directly into the protective devices set up by the North Australians. Old North Australia was immensely wealthy. It was known the length and breadth of all the stars that they had hired mercenaries, defensive spies, hidden agents, and alerting devices. Even Manhome, Mother Earth herself, whom no money could buy, was bribed by the drug of life. An ounce of the Santa Clara drug, reduced, crystallized, and called Stroon, could give 40 to 60 years of life. Sperm entered the rest of the earth by ounces and pounds, but it was refined back on Old North Australia by the ton. With treasure like this, the North Australians owned an unimaginable world whose resources overreached all conceivable limits of money. They could buy anything. They could pay with other people's lives. For hundreds of years, they had given secret funds to buying foreigners' services to safeguard their own security. Benjamin stood there in the lobby, Mother Hilton's little kittens. He had all the wisdom and wealth of 1,000 worlds stuck in his mind, but he didn't dare ask anywhere as to what it meant. Suddenly, he brightened. He looked like a man who had thought of a good game to play, a pleasant diversion to be welcomed, a companion to be remembered, and new food to be tasted. He had had a very happy thought. There was one source that wouldn't talk, the library. He could at least check the obvious, simple things and find out what there was already in the realm of public knowledge concerning the secret he had taken from the dying boy. His own safety had not been wasted. Johnny's life had not been thrown away if he could find any one of the 4 words as a key. Mother are hidden or little in its special meaning are kitten. He might yet break through to the loot of North Australia. He swung jubilantly, turning on the ball of his right foot. He moved lightly and pleasantly toward the billiard room, beyond which lay the library. He went in. This was a very expensive hotel and very old-fashioned. It even had books made out of paper with genuine bindings. Benjamin crossed the room. He saw that they had the Galactic Encyclopedia in 200 volumes. He took down the volume headed I. He opened it from the rear, looking for the name, and there it was. Hitton, Benjamin, pioneer of Old North Australia. Said to be originator of part of the defense system. Live 8107-19-17213. That was all. Benjamin moved among the books. The word kittens in that peculiar spelling did not occur anywhere, neither in the encyclopedia nor in any other list maintained by the library. He walked out and upstairs back to his room. Little had not appeared at all. It was probably the boy's own childish mistake. He took a chance. The mother, half blind with bewilderment and worry, sat in a stiff-backed chair on the edge of the porch. The other women talked to her. They knew her husband was coming. Benjamin went up to her and tried to pay his respects. She didn't see him. I'm leaving now, ma'am. I'm going on to the next planet, but I'll be back in 2 or 3 subjective weeks. And if you need me for urgent questions, I'll leave my addresses with the police here. Benjamin left the weeping mother. Benjamin left the quiet hotel. He obtained a priority passage. The easygoing Sunvale police made no resistance to his demand for a sudden departure visa. After all, he had an identity, he had his own funds, and it was not the custom of Sunvale to contradict its guests. Benjamin went on the ship, and as he moved toward the cabin in which he could rest for a few hours, a man stepped up beside him. A youngish man, hair parted in the middle, short of stature, gray of eyes. This man was the local agent of the North Australian Secret Police. Benjamin, trained thief that he was, did not recognize the policeman. It never occurred to him that the library itself had been attuned and that the word Kittons in the peculiar North Australian spelling was itself an alert. Looking for that spelling had set off a minor alarm. He had touched the tripwire. The stranger nodded. Benjamin nodded back. I'm a traveling man, waiting over between assignments. I haven't been doing very well. How are you making out? Doesn't matter to me. I don't earn money. I'm a technician. Liverant is the name. Benjamin sized him up. The man was a technician, all right. They shook hands perfunctorily. Liverant said, I'll join you in the bar a little later. I think I'll rest a bit first. They both lay down then and said very little while the momentary flash of planoform went through the ship. The flash passed. From books and lessons, they knew that the ship was leaping forward in 2 dimensions while, somehow or other, the theory of space itself was fed into the computers. And that these in turn were managed by the Go captain who controlled the ship. They knew these things, but they could not feel them. All they felt was the sting of a slight pain. The sedative was in the air itself, sprayed in the ventilating system. They both expected to become a little drunk. The thief Benjamin Bozard was trained to resist intoxication and bewilderment. Any sign whatever that a telepath had tried to read his mind would have been met with fierce animal resistance implanted in his unconscious during early years of training. Bozard was not trained against deception by a technician. It never occurred to the thieves skilled back on Viola Siberia that it would be necessary for their own people to resist deceivers. Liverant had already been in touch with North Australia whose money reached across the stars, North Australia who had alerted 100,000 worlds against the mere thought of trespass. Liverant began to chatter. I wish I could go further than this trip. I wish that I could go to Olympia. You can buy anything in Olympia. I've heard of it, said Bozart. It's sort of a funny trading planet with not much chance for businessmen, is it? Liverant laughed, and his laughter was merry and genuine. Trading. They don't trade. They swap. They take all the stolen loot of 1,000 worlds and sell it over again, and they change and they paint it and they mark it. That's their business there. The people are blind. It's a strange world, and all you have to do is to go in there and you can have anything you want. Man, said Liverant, what I could do in a year in that place. Everybody is blind except me and a couple of tourists. And there's all the wealth that everybody thought he's mislaid. Half the wrecked ships, the forgotten colonies, they've all been cleaned out, and bang. It all goes to Olympia. Olympia wasn't really that good, and Liverant didn't know why it was his business to guard the killer there. All he knew was that he had a duty, and the duty was to direct the trespasser. Many years before either man was born, the code word had been planted in directories, in books, in packing cases, and invoices. Kittons misspelled. This was the cover name for the outer moon of North Australian defense. The use of the cover name brought a raging alert ready into action, with systemic nerves as hot and quick as incandescent tungsten wire. By the time that they were ready to go to the bar and have refreshments, Benjamin had half forgotten that it was his new acquaintance who had suggested Olympia rather than another place. He had to go to Viola Siberia to get the credits to make the flight to take the wealth to win the world of Olympia. I.B. at home on his native planet, Bozart was a subject of a gentle but very sincere celebration. The elders of the Guild of Thieves welcomed him. They congratulated him. Who else could have done what you've done, boy? You've made the opening move in a brand new game of chess. There has never been a gambit like this before. We have a name, we have an animal. We'll try it right here. The Thieves' Council turned to their own encyclopedia. They turned through the name, Hitton, and then found the reference Kitten. None of them knew that a false lead had been planted there by an agent in their world. The agent, in his turn, had been seduced years before, debauched in the middle of his career, forced into temporary honesty, blackmailed, and sent home. In all the years that he had waited for a dreaded countersign, a countersign which he himself never knew to be an extension of North Australian intelligence. He never dreamed that he could pay his debt to the outside world so simply. All they had done was to send him one page to add to the encyclopedia. He added it and then went home, weak with exhaustion. The years of fear and waiting were almost too much for the thief. He drank heavily for fear that he might otherwise kill himself. Meanwhile, the pages remained in order, including the new one, slightly altered for his colleagues. The encyclopedia indicated the change like any normal revision, though the whole entry was new and falsified. Beneath this passage, one revision ready, dated 24th year of second issue. The reported kittens of North Australia are nothing more than the use of organic means to induce the disease in earth-mutated sheep, which produces a virus in its turn. As refinable as the Santa Clara drug. The term kittens enjoyed a temporary vogue as a reference term both to the disease and to the destructibility of the disease in the event of external attack. This is believed to have been connected with the career of Benjamin Hitton, one of the original pioneers of North Australia. The Council of Thieves read it and the chairman of the council said, "I've got your papers ready. You can go try them now. Where do you want to go? For New Hamburg?" "No," said Benjamin. "I thought I'd try Olympia." "Olympia's all right," said the chairman. "Go easy. There's only one chance in 1,000 you'll fail. But if you do, we might have to pay for it." He smiled wryly and handed Benjamin a blank mortgage against all the labor and all the property of Viola, Siberia. The chairman laughed with a sort of snort. "It'd be pretty rough on us if you had to borrow enough on the trading planet to force us to become honest and then lost out anyhow." "No fear," said Benjamin. "I can cover that. There are some worlds where all dreams die, but square-clouded Olympia is not one of them. The eyes of men and women are bright on Olympia, for they see nothing." "Brightness was the color of pain," said Nachtigall, "when we could see. If thine eye offend thee, pluck thyself out, for the fault lies not in the eye but in the soul." Such talk was common in Olympia, where the settlers went blind a long time ago and now think themselves superior to sighted people. Radar wires tickle their living brains. They can perceive radiation as well as can an animal-type man with little aquariums hung in the middle of his face. Their pictures are sharp and they demand sharpness. Their buildings soar at impossible angles. Their blind children sing songs as the tailored climate proceeds according to the numbers geometrical as a kaleidoscope. There went the man, Bozart himself. Among the blind his dreams soared, and he paid money for information which no living person had ever seen. Sharp, clouded, and aqua-skied, Olympia swam past him like another man's dream. He did not mean to tarry there, because he had a rendezvous with Death in the sticky, sparky space around North Australia. Once in Olympia, Benjamin went about his arrangements for the attack on old North Australia. On his second day on the planet, he had been very lucky. He met a man named Lavender and he was sure he had heard the name before. Not a member of his own guild of thieves, but a daring rascal with a bad reputation among the stars. It was no wonder that he had found Lavender. His pillow had told him Lavender's story 15 times during his sleep in the past week. And whenever he dreamed dreams which had been planted in his mind by the North Australian counterintelligence. They had beaten him in getting to Olympia first, and they were prepared to let him have only that which he deserved. The North Australian police were not cruel, but they were out to defend their world. And they were also out to avenge the murder of a child. The last interview which Benjamin had with Lavender in striking a bargain before Lavender agreed was a dramatic one. Lavender refused to move forward. I'm not going to jump off anywhere. I'm not going to raid anything. I'm not going to steal anything. I've been rough, of course I have. But I don't get myself killed, and that's what you're bloody well asking for. Think of what we'll have. The wealth, I tell you, there's more money here than anything else anybody's ever tried. Lavender laughed. You think I haven't heard that before? You're a crook and I'm a crook. I don't go anything that's on speculation. I want my hard cash down. I'm a fighting man and you're a thief, and I'm not going to ask you what you're up to, but I want my money first. I haven't got it, said Benjamin. Lavender stood up. Then you shouldn't have talked to me, because it's going to cost you money to keep me quiet whether you hire me or not. The bargaining process started. Lavender looked ugly indeed. He was a soft, ordinary man who had gone to a lot of trouble to become evil. Sin is a lot of work. The sheer effort it requires often shows in the human face. Bozard stared him down, smiling easily, not even contemptuously. Cover me while I get something from my pocket, said Bozard. Lavender did not even acknowledge the comment. He did not show a weapon. His left thumb moved slowly across the outer edge of his hand. Benjamin recognized the sign, but did not flinch. See, he said, a planetary credit. Lavender laughed. I've heard that too. Take it, said Bozard. The adventurer took the laminated card. His eyes widened. It's real, he breathed. It is real. He looked up, incalculably more friendly. I never even saw one of these before. What are your terms? Meanwhile, the bright, vivid Olympians walked back and forth past them, their clothing all white and black in dramatic contrast. Unbelievable geometric designs shone on their cloaks and their hats. The two bargainers ignored the natives. They concentrated on their own negotiations. Benjamin felt fairly safe. He placed a pledge of 1 year's service of the entire planet of Viola Siberia in exchange for the full and unqualified services of Captain Lavender, once of the Imperial Marines Internal Space Patrol. He handed over the mortgage. The year's guarantee was written in. Even on Olympia there were accounting machines which relayed the bargain back to Earth itself, making the mortgage a valid and binding commitment against the whole planet of thieves. This, thought Lavender, was the first step of revenge. After the killer had disappeared, his people would have to pay with sheer honesty. Lavender looked at Benjamin with a clinical sort of concern. Benjamin mistook his look for friendliness, and Benjamin smiled his slow, charming, easy smile. Momentarily happy, he reached out his right hand to give Lavender a brotherly solemnification of the bargain. The men shook hands, and Bozart never knew with what he shook hands. Hey, Ray Lando. Gray grass from sky to sky. Not near the weird deer. Not a mountain, low or high, only hills and gray. Watch the dimpled twinkles blooming on the star bar. That is Australia. All the muddy gubbery is gone, all the work and the waiting and the pain. Beige-brown sheep lie on blue-gray grass while the clouds rush past, low overhead like iron pipes sealing the world. Take your pick of sick sheep, man, it's the sick that pays. Sneeze me a planet, man, or cough me up a spot of immortality. If it's far me there, where the naughties and the trolls like you live, it's to right here. That's the book, boy. If you haven't seen Australia, you haven't seen it. If you did see it, you wouldn't believe it. Charts call it Old North Australia. There in the heart of the world was the farm which guarded the world. This was the hidden place. Towers surrounded it, and fires hung between the towers, some of them drooping crazily and some gleaming with a sheen not shown by any other metal made by men from Earth. Within the towers there was open land, and within the open land there were 12,000 hectares of concrete. Radar reached down to within millimeter smoothness of the surface of the concrete, and the other radar threw patterns back and forth down through molecular thinness. The farm went on. In its center there was a group of buildings. That was where Catherine Hitton worked on the task which her family had accepted for the defense of her world. No germ came in, no germ went out. All the food came in by space transmitter. Within this there lived animals. The animals depended on her alone. Were she to die suddenly, by mischance or as a result of an attack by one of the animals? The authorities of her world had complete facsimiles of herself with which to train new animal tenders under hypnosis. This was a place where the gray wind leapt forward, released from the hills, where it raced across the gray concrete, where it blew past the radar towers. The polished, faceted, captive moon always hung due overhead. The wind hit the buildings, themselves gray, with the impact of a blow, before it raced over the open concrete beyond and whistled away into the hills. Outside the buildings, the valley had not needed much camouflage. It looked like the rest of North Australia. The concrete itself was tinted very slightly to give the impression of poor, starved natural soil. This was the farm, and this the woman. Together they were the outer defense of the richest world mankind had ever built. Catherine Hitton looked out the window and thought to herself, 42 days before I go to market, and it's a welcome day that I get there and hear the jig of music. Oh, to walk on market day and see my people proud and gay. She breathed deeply of the air. She loved the great hills, though in her youth she had seen many other worlds. And then she turned back into the building to the animals and the duties which awaited her. She was the only mother hidden, and these were her little kittens. She moved among them. She and her father had bred them from Earthmink, from the fiercest, smallest, craziest little minks that had ever been shipped out from man home. Out of these minks they had made their lives to keep away other predators who might bother the sheep on whom the strewn grew. But these minks were born mad. Generations of them had been bred psychotic to the bone. They lived only to die, and they died so that they could stay alive. These were the kittens of North Australia. Animals in whom fear, rage, hunger, and sex were utterly intermixed, who could eat themselves or each other, who could eat their young, or people, or anything organic. Animals who screamed with murder lust when they felt love, animals born to loathe themselves with a fierce and livid hate, and who survived only because their waking moments were spent on couches, strapped tight claw by claw so that they could not hurt each other or themselves. Mother didn't let them waken only a few moments in each lifetime. They bred and killed. She wakened them only 2 at a time. All that afternoon she moved from cage to cage. The sleeping animals slept well. The nourishment ran into their bloodstreams. They lived sometimes for years without awaking. She bred them when the males were only partly awakened and the females aroused only enough to accept her veterinary treatments. She herself had to pluck the young away from their mothers as the sleeping mothers begot them. Then she nursed the young through a few happy weeks of kinhood until their adult natures began to take. Their eyes ran red with madness and heat, and their emotions sounded in the sharp, hideous little cries they uttered through the building, and the twisting of their neat, furry faces, the rolling of their crazy, bright eyes, and the tightening of their sharp, sharp claws. She woke none of them this time. Instead, she tightened them in their straps. She removed the nutrients. She gave them delayed stimulus medicine which would, when they were awakened, bring them suddenly full waking with no lulled stupor first. Finally, she gave herself a heavy sedative, leaned back in a chair, and waited for the call which would come. When the shock came and the call came through, she would have to do what she had done thousands of times before. She would ring an intolerable noise through the whole laboratory. Hundreds of the mutated minks would awaken. In awakening, they would plunge into life with hunger, with hate, with rage, and with sex, plunge against their straps, strive to kill each other, their young, themselves, her. They would fight everything and everywhere, and do everything they could to keep going. She knew this. In the middle of the room there was a tuner. The tuner was a direct, empathic relay capable of picking up the simpler range of telepathic communications. Into this tuner went the concentrated emotions of Mother Hitton's little kittens. The rage, the hate, the hunger, the sex were all carried far beyond the limits of the tolerable, and then all were thereupon amplified. And then the wave band on which this telepathic control went out was amplified right there beyond the studio, on the high towers that swept the mountain ridge. up and beyond the valley in which the laboratory lay. And Mother Hitton's moon, spinning geometrically, bounced the relay into a hollow envelopement. From the faceted moon, it went to the satellites, 16 of them apparently part of the weather control system. These blanketed not only space but nearby subspace. The Australians had thought of everything. The short shocks of an alert came from Mother Hitton's transmitter bank. A call came. Her thumb went numb. The noise shrieked. The mink wakened. Immediately, the room was full of chattering, scraping, hissing, growling, and howling. Under the sound of the animal voices, there was the other sound, a scratchy, snapping sound like hail falling on a frozen lake. It was the individual claws of hundreds of mink trying to tear their way through metal panels. Mother Hitton heard a gurgle. One of the minks had succeeded in tearing its paw loose and had obviously started to work on its own throat. She recognized the tearing of fur, the ripping of veins. She listened for the cessation of that individual voice, but she couldn't be sure. The others were making too much noise. One mink less. Where she sat, she was partly shielded from the telepathic relay, but not altogether. She herself, bold as she was, felt queer wild dreams go through her. She thrilled with fate as she thought of beings suffering out beyond her, suffering terribly since they were not masked by the built-in defenses of the North Australian communications system. She felt the wild throb of long-forgotten lust. She hungered for things she had not known she remembered. She went through the spasms of fear that the hundreds of animals expressed. Underneath this, her sane mind kept asking, how much longer can I take it? How much longer must I take it? Lord God, be good to your people here on this world. Be good to poor old me. The green light went on. She pressed a button on the other side of her chair. The gas hissed in, and she passed into unconsciousness. She knew that her kittens passed into instant unconsciousness too. She would waken before they did, and then her duties would begin, checking the living ones, taking out the one that had clawed out its own throat. Taking out those who had died of heart attacks, rearranging them, dressing their wounds, treating them alive and asleep and happy, breathing, living in their sleep. Until the next call should come to waken them for the defense of the treasures which blessed and cursed her native world. Everything had gone exactly right. Lavender had found an illegal planoform ship. This was no inconsequential accomplishment, since planoform ships were very strictly licensed, and obtaining an illegal one was a chore on which a planet full of crooks could easily have worked a lifetime. Lavender had been lavished with money, Benjamin's money. The honest wealth of the thieves' planet had gone in and had paid the falsifications and great debts. Imaginary transactions that were fed to the computers for ships and cargoes and passengers that would be almost untraceably commingled in the commerce of 10,000 worlds. Let him pay for it, said Lavender, to one of his confederates, an apparent criminal who was also an Australian agent. This is paying good money for bad. You better spend a lot of it. Just before Benjamin took off, Lavender sent on an additional message. He sent it directly through the Go Captain, who usually did not carry messages. The Go Captain was a really commander of the North Australian fleet, but he had been carefully ordered not to look like it. The message concerned the planoform license, another 20-odd tablets of Spruan which could mortgage Viola Sideria for hundreds upon hundreds of years. The captain said, I don't have to send that through. The answer is yes. Benjamin came into the control room. This was contrary to regulations, but he had hired the ship to violate regulations. The captain looked at him sharply. You're a passenger, get out. Benjamin said, you have my little yacht on board. I am the only man here outside of your people. Get out. There's a fine if you're caught here. It does not matter, Benjamin said. I'll pay it. You will you, said the captain. You would not be paying 20 tablets of Spruan. That's ridiculous. Nobody could get that much Spruan. Benjamin laughed, thinking of the thousands of tablets he would soon have. All he had to do was to leave the planoform ship behind, strike once, go past the Kittons, and come back. His power and his wealth came from the fact that he knew he could now reach it. The mortgage of 20 tablets of strewn against this planet was a low price to pay if it would pay off at thousands to one. The captain replied, "It's not worth it. It just is not worth risking 20 tablets for your being here. But I can tell you how to get inside the North Australian communications net if that is worth 27 tablets." Benjamin went tense. For a moment he thought he might die. All this work, all this training, the dead boy on the beach, the gamble with the credit, and now this unsuspected antagonist. He decided to face it out. "What do you know?" said Benjamin. "Nothing," said the captain. "You said North Australia." "That I did," said the captain. "If you said North Australia, you must have guessed it. Who told you? Where else would a man go if you look for infinite riches? If you get away with it, 20 tablets is nothing to a man like you." "It's 200 years worth of work from 300,000 people," said Benjamin grimly. "When you get away with it, you will have more than 20 tablets, and so will your people." And Benjamin thought of the thousands and thousands of tablets. "Yes, that I know. If you don't get away with it, you've got the card." "That's right. All right. Get me inside the net. I'll pay the 27 tablets. Give me the card." Benjamin refused. He was a trained thief, and he was alert to thievery. Then he thought again. This was the crisis of his life. He had to gamble a little on somebody. He had to wager the card. "I'll mark it and then I'll give it back to you." Such was his excitement that Benjamin did not notice that the card went into a duplicator, that the transaction was recorded, that the message went back to Olympic Center, that the loss and the mortgage against the planet of Viola, Siberia should be credited to certain commercial agencies on Earth for 300 years to come. Benjamin got the card back. He felt like an honest thief. If he did die, the card would be lost and his people would not have to pay. If he won, he could pay that little bit out of his own pocket. Benjamin sat down. The go captain signaled to his pinlighters. The ship lurched. For half a subjective hour they moved, the captain wearing a helmet of space upon his head, sensing and grasping and guessing his way, stepping to stepping stone, right back to his home. He had to fumble the passage or else Benjamin might guess that he was in the hands of double agents. But the captain was well trained, just as well trained as Benjamin. Agents and thieves, they rode together. They plano-formed inside the communications net. Benjamin shook hands with them. "You are allowed to materialize as soon as I call." "Good luck, sir," said the captain. "Good luck to me," said Benjamin. He climbed into his space yacht. For less than a second in real space, the gray expanse of North Australia loomed up. The ship, which looked like a simple warehouse, disappeared into plano form and the yacht was on its own. The yacht dropped. As it dropped, Benjamin had a hideous moment of confusion and terror. He never knew the woman down below, but she sensed him plainly as he received the wrath of the much amplified Kittons. His conscious mind quivered under the blow. With a prolongation of subjective experience which made 1 or 2 seconds seem like months of her drunken bewilderment, Benjamin Bozart swept beneath the tide of his own personality. The moon relay threw minkish minds against him. The synapses of his brain reformed to conjure up might have been terrible things that never happened to any man. Then his knowing mind widened out in an overload of stress. His subcortical personality lived on a little longer. His body fought for several minutes. Mad with lust and hunger, the body arched in the pilot's seat, the mouth but deep into his own arm. Driven by lust, the left hand toward his face, ripping out his left eyeball. He screeched with animal lust as he tried to devour himself, not entirely without success. The overwhelming telepathic message of Mother Hitton's little kittens ground into his brain. The mutated minks were fully awake. The relay satellites had poisoned all the space around him with the craziness to which the minks were bred. Mozart's body did not live long. After a few minutes, the arteries were open, the head slumped forward, and the yacht was dropping helplessly toward the warehouses which it had meant to raid. North Australian police picked it up. The police themselves were ill. All of them were ill. All of them were white-faced. Some of them had vomited. They had gone through the edge of the Minty fence. They had passed through the telepathic band at its thinnest and weakest point. This was enough to hurt them badly. They did not want to know. They wanted to forget. One of the younger policemen looked at the body and said, "What on earth could do that to a man?" "You picked the wrong job," said the police captain. The young policeman said, "What's the wrong job?" "The wrong job is trying to rob us, boy. We are defended, and we don't want to know how." The young policeman, humiliated and on the verge of anger, looked almost as if he would defy his superior, while keeping his eyes away from the body of Benjamin and Bozart. The older man said, "If it's all right. He did not take long to die, and this is the man who killed the boy Johnny, not very long ago." "Oh, so soon?" "We brought him." The old police officer nodded. "We let him find his death. That's how we live. Tough, isn't it?" The ventilators whispered softly, gently. The animal slept again. The jet of air poured down on Mother, and the telepathic relay was still on. She could feel herself, the sheds, the faceted moon, the little satellites. In the robber there was no sign. She stumbled to her feet. Her raiment was moist with perspiration. She needed a shower and fresh clothes. Back at Manholm, the commercial credit circuit called shrilly for human attention. A junior sub-chief of the instrumentality walked over to the machine and held out his hand. The machine dropped a card neatly into his fingers. He looked at the card. Debit Viola Siberia Credit Earth Contingency, Subcredit North Australian Account, 400 million man mega years. The while alone, he whistled to himself in the empty room. "We'll all be dead, Struner no strewn, before they finish paying that." He went off to tell his friends the odd news. The machine, not getting its card back, made another one. End of Mother Hitton's Little Kittons by Cordwainer Smith.